Coalition Chaplain Debbie Royals will be opening us in prayer.
Take a deep breath and center ourselves. If possible, ground your feet so that you are connected to our Mother Earth. Creator, we come humbly before you once again, walking the paths of our ancestors and knowing our interconnectedness with all of creation, and seeking to walk softly on our Mother Earth so that our little ones and those that follow can enjoy the abundance of life in the land. We thank you for this day, for this time, and for this place. Creator, we recognize that we have suffered at the hand of colonizers and settlers for more than 250 years. Their way of governing has mistaken the foundation of a shared interdependent life in trade for taking more than they need by forcing policies that erase your people and promotes the false security and success of independence. Trauma from stolen land, stolen relatives, attempted annihilation of the diverse languages, cultures, and traditions that were born out of a relationship with our Mother Earth, and all that walk, crawl, swim, fly, those that give food and those that shade us, those that tower above us and those that live in darkness, inside, but are still rich with minerals that are at risk. We are strong, Creator. We have survived another day to defend the resources, protect the innocent, fight for justice, and speak the truth in spite of every challenge and at all cost. Protect us. Go before us, behind us, above us, below us, around us as we walk this path to equity, justice, and the peace that surpasses all understanding. Release the suffering, heal the broken, and sustain us in all that we do. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us this evening with the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. We are a coalition of people of faith who organize to dismantle systems of oppression and walk alongside our Indigenous relatives as they seek sovereignty over their lands and waters. We're one of the hosts of this event, and so I'd like to pass this along to do a quick introduction of our many hosts. I will pass to Lorraine Stutzman-Amstutz to introduce herself.
Thank you, Deb. I'm Lorraine Stutzman-Amstutz, the denominational minister for peace and justice for Mennonite Church USA, joining you from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which are ancestral lands to a number of indigenous tribes, including the Susquehannocks, who are best known in Lancaster County as the Conestogas, as well as the Nanticokes and the Delaware Lenape people. And I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence and displacement and migration that bring us together today. And I appreciate being invited here for this conversation, knowing that it's a struggle for many within our congregations to figure out how to engage in patriotic events that celebrate a partial story of the last 250 years. So thank you for engaging in a more complete story that explores the path of what our future could and should look like. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Lorraine. We'll pass to Lydia Buckland.
Thanks so much, Deborah. My name is Lydia Buckland, and I serve as the president and dean of Episcopal Divinity School. I'm joining you from the Anishinaabe homelands. On behalf of Episcopal Divinity School, I'd like to thank the coalition and all of our partners for this important conversation. Our work of decolonizing theological education, not just across the Americas, but globally, is something we are deeply committed to at EDS. And it's always an honor to partner collaboratively as we tell our collective truths and come together to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Rena Novotny, are you able to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, hi everyone. I'm Rena Novotny, and I am coming to you from Salmon Arm, British Columbia, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc peoples. I am co-director at the Center for Reconciliation at St. Stephen's University. St. Stephen's is a graduate level theology school with a department of Indigenous reconciliation. The program is called Truth Telling and Reconciling with Indigenous peoples, designed by Indigenous peoples, targeted to non-Indigenous peoples on how to become better settlers, how to understand the truth and ally with our Indigenous brothers and sisters throughout Turtle Island. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm delighted and look forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rena. Lisa Bortner, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening and welcome. My name is Lisa Bortner. I have the privilege of serving as president of the National Episcopal Church Women. And I'd like to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the coalition for inviting the National ECW to partner with them for this webinar. As women of faith, we are called to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. The doctrine of discovery represents a painful chapter in history, and while its origins stretch back centuries, its effects continue to be felt today in Indigenous communities. The Episcopal Church has acknowledged the harm caused by the doctrine of discovery and has committed itself to the work of truth-telling. Our mission as Episcopal Church women we're compelled to pray and advocate and serve while empowering women and promoting dignity and justice. So our National ECW Social Justice Committee has chosen to focus its advocacy efforts on missing and murdered Indigenous women. The crisis is one of the most urgent and heartbreaking issues facing Indigenous communities today. And by raising awareness and supporting advocacy efforts and listening to Indigenous voices, we strive to be faithful partners in the pursuit of justice and healing. So thank you for joining us in this effort and welcome to tonight's webinar.
What a joy to be with you all. I'm Sarah Augustine. I'm the executive director of the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. So grateful to see you here. And so Deborah has our chaplain already conducted our prayer. Okay, terrific. So here is my opportunity to greet our panelists. And what a joy it is. So I want to begin with Diane Schenandoah. So good to see you, Diane. Thank you for choosing to be here. I'm going to introduce you. Diane was born on Onondaga Nation territory and the homeland of her father. Diane holds the responsibility of faith keeper for the Oneida Nation. She was born in the Wolf Clan, and her mother, Maisie, was a Wolf Clan mother for Oneida Nation. As a young woman, with the support of her artistic family, she pursued her love of the arts at the Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and later the prestigious Institute of the American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, where she was mentored by the sculptor Alan Hauser. Diane is an artist with many talents, including creative writing, singing, and of course, sculpture and carving. Her art practice centers on a respect and loving relationship with her materials of choice, such as natural woods, clay, stone, and bone. All work with a sense of care and attention that comes across to the viewer. Her sculptures of women, always tenderly depicted, bring focus to the significant roles of women as mothers, nurturers, wisdom keepers, and life givers. And her art is grounded in teachings and philosophies of the Haudenosaunee people, which she generously shares with all of us, granting an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and Haudenosaunee knowledge. In addition to being an artist and a leader within her family, clan, community, and nation, Diane currently serves as the one who helps them at the Barnes Center of the Arch in Syracuse University, supporting students by sharing Haudenosaunee principles and philosophies on wellness and well-being. Her art is in numerous private collections and represented in the collections of the Iroquois Museum, and many more, of course, at NYSM. So welcome, Diane. We're so glad you're with us.
Thank you, Sarah, for that beautiful introduction. So nice to see you again. I'm so very honored to be a part of this amazing work that you all are doing. Oh my goodness, thank you. It's incredible. So now I go. Let me just say a few words in my language. Sago Sagweg, taking that Jatli and then gets Dionaga and Gawan Mislade Wagara Jat the way junior Lishtak, Negarawiza Wagway, Sadically what that Kaluni de Talu Songwai Ditu Danny Tonda and Ganga and the which basically I said it's so nice to meet all of you. Thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be a part of this, and may you all be well and your families well. And I'm coming from traditional Oneida territories that have never been ceded. So this has always been in the hands of the Onondaga people, part of the Six Nation Confederacy.
We're so glad you're here. It's also my privilege to introduce Mark Charles, my brother. So glad to have you here, Mark. Mark is a speaker, writer, and consultant. He is the son of an American woman of Dutch heritage and a Navajo or Diné man. Mark teaches the complexities of American history regarding race, culture, and Christendom in order to help forge a path of healing and conciliation for the nation. In 2012, Mark hosted a public reading at the U.S. Capitol of the Buried Apology to Native Peoples in the 2010 Department of Defense Appropriations Bill given by the 111th Congress. He is the co-author of the book Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery, and he authors the blog Reflections from the Hogan. He is a co-founder of the Would Jesus Eat Fry Bread College Conference Series and has served on the board of the Christian Reformed Church of North America and the Christian Community Development Association. In 2020, Mark ran as an independent candidate for the presidency of the United States, advocating for a Truth and Conciliation Commission, a formal and national dialogue on issues of race, gender, and class. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and welcome to everyone from the coalition. It's an honor to be with you. I'll introduce myself more later when we start the panel, but Sarah, thank you for the generous introduction. It's an honor to be with you today. So, yeah.
So glad that you are here with us, brother. Thank you for being here. It's also my great privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, Asma Uddin, who is a professor, author, and lawyer specializing in religious liberty. Welcome, Asma. Her recent major publications include When Islam is Not a Religion, The Politics of Vulnerability, and multiple scholarly articles utilizing social science theories to map depolarization strategies for the United States Supreme Court. Asma is an assistant professor of law at Michigan State University, where she teaches constitutional law and international human rights. Previously, she was a research fellow at Georgetown University's Center for the Constitution and visiting assistant professor of law at the Catholic University of America. She has also taught the Religious Liberty Clinic at Harvard Law School. After graduating from the University of Chicago Law School, Asma served as legal counsel for the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. While there, she helped litigate religious liberty cases in both international and domestic tribunals, including the United States Supreme Court. Asma is also a fellow with the Freedom Forum Institute and the Aspen Institute's Religion and Society program in Washington, D.C. At Aspen, she created a data-based approach to reducing Muslim-Christian polarization in the United States. Her work on depolarization has been supported by the Fetzer Institute, the Pew Charitable Trust, the M.J. Murdoch Charitable Trust, McCartus Institute, the Institute for Humane Studies, and the Templeton Religion Trust. Welcome, Asma. We're so grateful that you're here.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be collaborating with you on what seems to be our first of hopefully many projects. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, I want to just quickly introduce the panel, sort of the question that is holding our conversation today, which is, what does it mean to celebrate 250 years of the Declaration of Independence on colonized land? How can we counteract the message of Christian nationalism that tries to whitewash our history? So that's kind of the question that's holding us. But before we get to that, I wanted to just connect with each of you and ask you some questions that relate to you specifically. And I'm wondering, Diane, if you would be willing to start. I have a question for you, and I can't convey to the folks here in our virtual room how precious Diane is to me and to many of us across the nation as an elder. I'm so grateful that you're here, Diane. And for those who haven't had a chance to take a look at our Indigenous Speakers series, Diane is one of our featured Indigenous speakers. You can see that on our website. But here's a question for you. I would just hope that you would share some of your teaching that you've given to me in the past. The U.S. is seen as the great democratic experiment. Would you be willing to share about the origins of democracy as we describe it in the Haudenosaunee tradition and cosmology, and the values that underpin Haudenosaunee democratic practices?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be honored to. You know, the teachings of the Confederacy at the beginning, of course, starting with Sky Woman, because we say we all came from the Sky World. And, you know, as she came to Earth and created Earth, and, you know, she had a daughter. It's a long story, and I know we don't have time for the whole story, so I'll make this a little bit shorter. But, you know, as Turtle Island grew, as the populations grew, each people were given a set of instructions around the world of, you know, of the certain teachings. And of course, you know, human beings being human beings, we slowly and gradually moved away from our original instructions. And even among the Haudenosaunee, there used to be great wars going on. And at that time, in our teachings, we say there was a fellow named Hiawatha, who many of you might know as Hiawatha, but Hiawatha had his daughters murdered by an evil chief named Tadadaho. And at the time, they say he was so grieved, he was just so heartbroken that he wandered the mountains and hills for weeks and months, couldn't think, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He was just so distraught. And he decided to end his life, so he threw himself into a lake. And when he did, we say everything happens for a reason. So as he did, the geese pulled the water away from him. And at the bottom was the quahog shell, the wampum shell, the purple and white shell, which some of you may have seen, by the purple and white shell. And so he knew that everything happened for a reason. So he picked up that shell and he said, I need to find a way to heal. So he picked up that shell and began to make make beads to create a ceremony to help him heal. And across the way was Jagunsase, our first clan mother, and she was watching, she was listening as he was talking out loud and trying to find that healing within. And he created the first bead he made. He said, if I was to come across somebody grieving as much as I am, I would want them to take the eagle feather and brush the sounds of death from my ears, because the eagle that flies the highest up to Creator, that carries all of our good thoughts and our prayers. So then he created another bead, and he said, if I was to come across somebody grieving as much as I am, I would want them to take the softest skin of the deer skin, and wipe the tears from my eyes so I could see all the beauty around me. I could see the wonderful creation in another person. I could see all the amazing colors of the earth. Then he created another bead, and the third bead, he said, this bead is going to represent water. He said, I would want somebody to hand me a drink of water, so it would wash that lump down in my throat, so I could speak again, so I could sing, so I could have conversation with another human being. So as he did this, we say, Jagunsase was listening, and we say that the peacemaker came down through the woods and asked him what he was doing. And he told him of the grief that he had gone through. And the peacemaker said to him, we're going to add more beads to this, another bead. And so I went and made another bead. And he said, this next bead is going to represent forgiveness. You need to be able to forgive. You need to be able to forgive others, and you need to be able to forgive yourself, because we've designed our life and our life lessons when we come here. So he said, but you're going to make one more bead, and this next bead is going to represent love, because you cannot forgive without love. So you have to have love in your heart. And so he was so thrilled to know how to find peace in his heart again. And Jagunsase was listening as well, and she came in and saw this as a way to end our war and fighting among our people. And so they traveled back to Onondaga, that's our capital, and they shared how they came to peace. And Tadadaho, they wanted to forgive Tadadaho for the evils that he'd done. But Tadadaho was just so crazy. They say he tied snakes in his hair to scare people. He was just a madman of sorts. And we don't know why he was so evil and so awful. Maybe he was abandoned at birth. Maybe he was disfigured. We don't know. But they tried to give him these messages of peace. And he said, I'll kill you too, and chase him out of there. So they went to the other nations and told them how we could have peace among our people. And each nation accepted these messages as a way to have peace and healing in their heart. So they went from nation to nation, and all those accepted the messages of peace. And as a collective, they all came back to Tadadaho and sang him songs of forgiveness and of love, that they loved him. And they say he was so moved that he fell to his knees crying. He couldn't believe that he was lovable. And they say, some say that when there was a great eclipse that passed over, that helped transform him and helped take that evil away from him, his mind. And when this happened, the clan mother stepped forward and pulled the snakes from his hair. And together they formed the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, where they would all hold hands around the tree of peace. And they had thrown their weapons underneath this tree and said, we will fight no more. And that's how the Confederacy came together. And so we were all equals, giving thanks, and everyone has a voice, all the children, everyone has a voice. We are all equal. We're not better than anybody. There is no hierarchy in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. There are titles that serve the people. But again, it's the women that are the matriarchs, the women that choose the chiefs, the women that remove the chiefs. It's the women that conduct and give the okay for our ceremonies, which we have 12 ceremonies, 13 ceremonies a year, I'm sorry. And every single ceremony is to give thanks for a specific reason. So that was kind of like the formation and basis of our Confederacy, is living under the great tree of peace and giving thanks for all that we have. And that's our duty every day. Kind of a long answer. The story I just told you takes about 12 days to tell. So we got an incredibly brief version of it.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you, Diane. And we'll come back to this teaching in a little bit, but I'd love to invite you, Asma, to talk about something that I have a question for you that's really from your specialty. The USA's founding and origin story professes religious freedom, but indigenous religious freedom is constantly under attack, especially from extractive industry. From a legal perspective, how might the denial of religious freedom impact democracy? How can we collectively support religious freedom for all people?
Yeah, it's a really important question, Sarah. We as Americans tell a story about ourselves, and it is one of the first stories that the country tells. People came to these shores to worship freely. They had been punished elsewhere for praying the wrong way, or for reading the wrong book, or for believing the wrong things. And so they crossed an ocean and built a country where no government could dictate how a person prays. I mean, that is the promise of America, right? And we wrote that promise near the very front of our Constitution. It is one of the first clauses in the First Amendment. It protects the free exercise of religion. And we call it our first freedom because it's one of our, I mean, literally because of its placement as a first in the First Amendment, but also because it's just the core of who we think we are as Americans and what this country is about. And it's a beautiful story, and like a lot of beautiful stories, it leaves someone out. The people who are already here had been praying on this land for thousands of years before anyone arrived looking for religious freedom. And much of their worship was inseparable from specific places on the land, particular springs, mountains, and groves that cannot be picked up and rebuilt somewhere more convenient. And for most of this country's history, the same nation that promised religious freedom to newcomers has treated the worship of these very first Americans as something that it could pave over. It could flood or dig up whenever there was money in the ground, right? This is a fight about the land, about what's to be gained from the ground, right? The monetary, the material versus the spiritual. And it's not a story about the past, right? Consider a place in Arizona known as Oak Flat. For the Apache, it is not a symbol of sacred, it is the sacred, a direct corridor to the Creator, the one place on earth where certain ceremonies can happen at all. In 2014, a single paragraph was slipped into a must-pass defense bill, and there was no hearing. And this bill ordered the land handed to a copper company owned by two foreign mining giants. The plan is to collapse the ground into a crater nearly 2 miles wide. And a few weeks ago, in March of this year, every legal challenge failed. The federal government, once they all failed, the federal government completed the transfer. The ceremonies will end and the place will be gone. Now, how did the law even allow that? And here's the part that's really important to understand. The law does protect sacred places when a religious community owns the building it worships in, right? We have an entire federal statute called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, right? The first part of that, religious land use, you're like, how do we have a statute called religious land use and we don't have this particular use of land protected? But it's really specific to physical buildings, right? And that's where it ends. When the holy place sits on land the government owns and then the government chooses to destroy it, the courts have treated that as simply a case of the government managing its own land. And if that's the way we look at it, right, it's all about our lens and how we view these things. If that's the way that this is being interpreted, then it doesn't constitute a burden on anyone's religion. And of course, I'm sure everyone here is like, how is that even possible? You make a particular worship like impossible, and now we still don't have a burden. And just so you know, in religious freedom law, you need a burden in order for the law to kind of step in. A federal court in the Oak Flat case agreed that the mine would end Apache worship there forever and held in the same breath that this was not a substantial burden on their faith. Before the claim was even weighed, a religion bound to a specific place had been defined as something the law doesn't even have to protect. Now, what does this have to do with democracy? A lot, and it reaches all of us. Even people who might not have a particular form of worship, it favors everyone. And this is something that sort of is the running theme across all of my work, is just this understanding that if you do not protect it for one group, ultimately it's just a matter of swapping out the groups that are not protected. And also that democracy is, this is not a right, is not a favor the majority grants when it feels generous. Okay, it is a limit on what any majority is allowed to do. Democracy is not only majority rule, it is majority rule with lines that the majority cannot cross. And religious freedom is one of those lines. A protection that shelters only the powerful and the familiar is not a right at all. It's actually just a privilege, and privileges can be taken back. When the protection for one unfamiliar faith is narrowed, that narrower rule becomes the rule for everyone. And this is actually really core to religious freedom law. We can get into it. The biggest narrowing in our law right now actually happened in a case involving Native American believers. A right is only ever strong as its treatment of the least powerful person who holds it.
The denial of religious freedom to the few is never really contained to the few. It teaches a whole people that the founding promise was not written with them in mind.
Mm.
And it quietly lowers the protection the rest of us are standing on. Of course, so one piece of good news is that this gap was built by human choices, which means that it can be closed by human choices. Thank you.
Wow, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for for all of that, Asma, because what it really does is it complexifies. It causes us to challenge this origin story that we've been told that what we're about is based on religious freedom. So I appreciate that. We're going to come back to that too. But first, I want to now turn to you, Mark Charles, and I have a question just for you too. The exclusionary founding of the United States and our, let's see. I want to talk about the exclusionary founding of the United States and our need for common memory. What was the influence of the doctrine of discovery in the Declaration of Independence? And how does a common memory help us to work toward a better future? And maybe, Mark, you could introduce yourself for us. I know you hope to do that. I'd love to hear that and your response to this question.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Yes, please let me introduce myself. So, Yate, Mark Charles Yanishya, Tsinbake Diné Nishle, Dr. Higlini Bashachin, Tsinbake Diné Dashache, Dr. Chitni Dashanella. In our Navajo culture, we're matrilineal, and our identities come from our mother's mother. My mother's mother is American of Dutch heritage, and so I say Tsinbake Diné Nishle, meaning I'm from the Wooden Shoe people. My second clan, my father's mother is Higlini, which is the waters that flow together. My third clan, my mother's father, is also Tsinbake Diné. And my fourth clan, my father's father, is Totochitni, which is the Bitterwater clan. It's one of the original clans of our Navajo people. I also just want to acknowledge I'm speaking to you now. I moved from our Navajo Nation to what my people call Washington. It's the lands of the Piscataway, known as Washington, D.C. And I've been living here for the past almost 11 years now. And so I want to honor and thank the Piscataway people for their stewardship of the land where I'm living. I am deeply grateful for their hospitality and for the care they've taken for this land where I'm living now. So the question you asked, I'm going to keep this short. I tend to go long, so I'm going to do my best to keep this short. And just to keep myself in check, I actually did a podcast on this very topic. I have a podcast called My Second Cup of Coffee, and I spoke about this at length in my podcast for almost an hour. I'm going to put that into the chat. So if anyone wants to go back and watch that later, if we missed something, but you are the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, so you know what the Doctrine of Discovery is, these series of papal bulls, essentially the church in Europe saying to the nation of Europe, wherever you go, whatever lands you find not ruled by white European Christians, those people are not human and the land is yours to take. And that doctrine gets embedded in the foundations of our country, but how it gets there is a fascinating journey. In 1616, so about 100 years after, 120 years after Columbus got lost, in 1616 to 1619, there was here on the East Coast, the Northeast, what's called the Great Dying, where there was a plague that came from the colonists off of the ships, and it decimated the villages here. Literally, just in a year, 2 years left, entire villages completely empty, literally just piles of bodies lying there. And as the colonists went through, and as word got back to King James, King George, or to England, they said, "This is good news. This is God's gift to us. God has cleansed these lands and given this land for us." And so, in 1620, when King James wrote the Charter of New England, he literally thanked God for the plague and said, "This is a sign that God has cleared the land and is giving it to us, and now we can go in and we can occupy and take over these lands." And a year later, they celebrated the first Thanksgiving in Plymouth, up in Massachusetts. And one of the thoughts is Plymouth might have been one of the communities that was decimated by this plague that came from the colonists. And so just this massive swarm of dying happened. 10 years later, John Winthrop, is on board a ship in the Boston colony. He preaches his sermon called A Model of Christian Charity. I won't go fully into that sermon, but he basically identifies himself and the colonists he's with as being there sent by God. He identifies that they are standing on the shores of their promised land, ready to go and take possession of them. And that sermon, I would call that sermon the birth of American exceptionalism. And American exceptionalism is not just the belief that Americans, and I hate to say Americans, that US citizens, America, the Americas are all the continents here.
Right.
The United States of America, we are the United States of the Americas.
Yeah.
Trump actually did us a favor by renaming it the Gulf of America. It's actually more accurate than the Gulf of Mexico because it's the Gulf of the Americas, which is what America is not our country. America is the continents. But anyway, and so in this sermon, he identified that they were standing on their promised lands, ready to go and take possession of them, and this belief in American exceptionalism. It's not just that U.S. citizens are better at things than other nations. It's that they have a different relationship with God than other nations, and that they are part of God's chosen group of people. And that gives them the right to ethnically cleanse their promised lands, right? Stephen Newcomb wrote a great book called Pagans in the Promised Land, where if you are a pagan living in land promised to God's people, you get ethnically cleansed, you get decimated, you get genocide enacted against you. And so that was happening in the 1600s. In 1763, King George draws a line down the Appalachian Mountains, and he says to the colonists that are here that they no longer have the right of discovery of the empty Indian lands that are west of Appalachia. This upset these colonists. They want access to those lands. So a few years later, they write a letter of protest. In their protest, they list 27 grievances against the king. Things that he's done. One of their grievances, grievance number 7, is that he's obstructing laws for naturalization, and he's increasing the conditions for new appropriations of land. Because King George, I'm sorry, said that they no longer have the right of discovery of the lands west of Appalachia. And then grievance 27 says he has endeavored to bring on the borders of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages. So he literally calls us subhumans. And so their doctrine of discovery had a massive influence in our founding documents because that list of 27 grievances was signed on July 4th, 1776. It's the Declaration of Independence. Literally 30 lines below the statement, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. This document refers to natives as savages and has a grievance that King George no longer gave the colonists the right of discovery over these lands. And so the foundations of this nation are rooted in this doctrine of discovery. And not only do most people not know the story about how this Declaration of Independence came about, but most people have never read the Declaration of Independence. They don't even know what these 27 grievances are. And so this is where it becomes so clear our nation does not know its own history. And it doesn't have a common memory. This is a theme I come back to multiple times in my speaking, my writing, and the work that I do, where there was a quote used by George Erasmus when he was writing about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that took place in Canada. And as he was writing about that, he used the quote that says, where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. Where community is to be born, common memory must be created. And this is the challenge we face as a nation. Not only do we not read our founding documents and know what they actually say, but we don't know the stories behind them. And the stories for white people are very different from the stories for people on the margins, for women, for people of color, right? White people have this notion of manifest destiny and promised land and God providing for them. Their own exceptionalism, and people of color have the lived experience of stolen lands and broken treaties, of enslavement and Jim Crow laws, of massacres and families being ripped apart at our borders. There's no common memory. And because there's no common memory, there's actually no point in all of US history where we can say we had healthy community across racial lines. It certainly does not exist today. And we can't look back in the past and find it there either, because it's always been there. And so this is where the coalition does a great job with this, but this is where all of us need to work really hard to teach this history, to share these stories, to create this common memory, not to cancel people, not to shame people, not to embarrass people, but because that's the step we need to make to build a healthier community.
Yeah, so Mark, what I hear you saying is that there, you didn't say it quite this, but I'm going to respond to what you said, which is that King George is really trying to, we presume, honor some treaties, at least preliminarily, and say, okay, expansion is going to stop here. And this really is one of the sparks to give rise to the Revolutionary War. Is that right?
Yes, although you're painting King George a bit brighter than he should be. Because remember, this was the 13 colonies, the US colonies that were rebelling and writing. And so Canada, they stayed with the king. They didn't have Declaration of Independence. And they still made it from their sea to shining sea.
They sure
still
did.
Stole land, right? They still did everything that they were just a little more polite about it. They kind of recognized the treaties, even though if they didn't keep them. And so it's not like, yeah, so King George was saying basically only the crown, only the throne has the right of discovery. The colonies do not have that right. And that's what the colonies were protesting when they wrote their declaration. That was the 27th grievance. No, that was the 7th grievance. You're taking away our right of discovery over these lands, and you're reserving it only for the crown. And so, yeah, so King George was trying to acknowledge the sovereignty of Native peoples. But if you want to know how that history went, just look at Canada's history, because that's where the crown remained in authority, and they still have the similar history that we have here in the US. Did we lose Sarah there? We might have lost Sarah.
Well, thank you for that, Mark. Sorry, I kind of lost the thread there for a minute, but I'm glad to be back. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And one of the questions I have for you, Diane, and thank you for sharing with us about the origin of the peace among the Six Nations, and how did that end up translating to be a major influence on Congress and how Congress was formed? Sorry, Diane, you're still muted.
Well, to put it briefly, when the colonists formed the 13 colonies, they actually wanted the Haudenosaunee Confederacy to be the 14th colony. And the Haudenosaunee refused at that time. They said, no, we're sovereign. We maintain our sovereignty. Even though the Revolutionary War kind of split the Confederacy up in certain areas and certain parts, we have maintained that sovereignty, even though it becomes kind of still a struggle today. We've had over 400 treaties, but our basic main treaty, or our one of our teachings, is the one dish, one spoon. And that is our philosophy still, is one dish, one spoon, meaning everybody has to eat. Everybody has to be a part of supporting each other and keeping that cohesiveness among our people. And, in knowing the history, the whitewashed history, it has been incredibly so. Even at Syracuse University, many students come from around the world, and I've been there for 5 years now, and just slowly I got so much pushback about talking about the Confederacy and that being the capital. But eventually the Syracuse University recognizes they're among the capital of the Haudenosaunee. So they've welcomed in that bit of addition for my title, even because there is no position like mine in other higher learning places. So in doing so, I've brought forth like the witness to injustice blanket exercise. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a powerful exercise that teaches the history, and it shocks so many people to hear that. And I've been asked countless times, why didn't I learn that in high school? And like, why didn't you? That's what you should be asking. Why didn't you learn this history in high school? And so much of it, and by rights, we're not even supposed to be here. 90% of our people were erased. And I'm sorry, I lost sight of your question, but
yeah. So I was really asking the original structure of Congress, I am told, was based on the Haudenosaunee governance structure. I wonder if you'd just say a word about that.
Well, it definitely is. We have in the Oneida Nation, there's 3 different clans. We sit in clans. And when there is an issue to be resolved, it is brought before the Turtle Clan. That's the well. They call it the well. And they discuss whether it's an issue to be should be brought before the entire council, and then it is passed over the fire to each of the clans. So each of the clans need to all agree, and if you disagree in something, then you have to give a good reason as to why you don't agree with that. And if you see the way the Congress sits and Congress and the way they pass things among the House, it's very, very similar to the way that we operate. And even in the Grand Council with all of the 6 nations, we have all of the 50 chiefs that sit in council. And it's very similar with the Onondaga Nation being in that center fire, and then the different nations pass it back and forth until all agree. Everybody has a say on what the issue is, what they're and how they feel, if they're oppose it or against it. And it's a very democratic process in that every voice matters, and it has to be a consensus, and it's brought before by the clan mothers. The clan mothers are the ones that bring in the issues, bring in the subjects of what there needs to be talked about, and then the chiefs are the speakers. They're not the leaders. They are there to speak what it is the wish of the clan mothers and the communities. So it's very, very similar as it's passed through the House of decision making.
Yeah, so the decision-making structure is similar, minus the clan mothers, right? We took the women out of the decision-making process.
Yeah, they forgot that one very important piece, which we say that the woman on top of the Capitol is a Haudenosaunee woman. That's what we hear. That's what I've heard all my life anyways.
Oh, terrific. So you may notice here that we have, there's a method to our madness, and we are talking about the legislative branch here a bit, and the judicial branch, and also the executive branch. And this is my question for all 3 of you that I kind of alluded to at the beginning of our conversation. What does it mean to celebrate 250 years of the Declaration of Independence on colonized land, given the understanding that, just as you were saying, Mark, that the sort of the promise of the nation was not made for everyone, and various ones of us have been excluded, whether by being indigenous, whether we've been earmarked as necessary for labor, or eradicated because of our land, or those people who are being intentionally excluded at the borders, or even removed because of some designation. And so I guess this is just a question for you all. How can we counteract the message of Christian nationalism that tries to whitewash our history, and lean in to, the Declaration of Independence on colonized land? So just love to hear your thoughts about this.
Well,
I can.
I'll go ahead, Asma.
No, I mean, it's been a question posed to me in different ways recently. A couple weeks ago, there was a big event on the mall, the National Mall, called Rededicate 250, that was produced partially with government funds and in partnership with the White House. And it was entirely about rededicating America, rededicate itself being a Protestant term, but it was entirely an evangelical celebration with one Jewish speaker. And it really kind of raised questions. Now there's like the establishment clause questions, which I think that the program organizers were actually very careful and clever in like avoiding the main things that are considered unconstitutional. But besides that, it was really just about like this really strong message that was being sent, right? Like, what are we like here? It wasn't just about what are we right now, but kind of a story of where we've always been, right? We're rededicating the country to its original mission, and it's going to be defined in this particular way. And there's the religious valence of it, right? Again, that this is evangelical. It's not even just a question of it preferencing Christianity above other religions, but a very particular type of Christianity. And at the same time, of course, in terms of the overlay between religion and politics, which of course there's a strong overlay, especially in recent elections, that a certain community has been behind one candidate and other communities behind another candidate. And it's really just another way of having sort of political warfare, but sort of using this religious cover for it. And I think that, this idea of rededicating, it's really kind of like, I think that to sort of respond to your question, I think this question that Mark brought up is the idea of like our history and our shared memory is so key. And I think that the history that you bring up, Mark, especially in light of these very explicit attempts to kind of rewrite that and talk about rededicating to what is being conceived and promoted as like the original vision for our country. It's like, what is that vision? And is it one that, do we have a shared understanding of it, a shared memory of it? Is this something that we want to rededicate ourselves to, or is this really about forging a different vision for our country, perhaps one that is more accurate to what America's been? And I think in addition to the stories that Mark shared of, I think there's also a story of just like other religious groups and how they have kind of figured in American history, right? Like in the time of, when the founding era, like when all, our Constitution was being written, there were actually, for example, Muslims like in the midst, but they were enslaved. And so the reality of their presence on American soil was invisible to the founders because of just the fact of slavery. And then, of course, moving forward from there as well, like there has been a long history in this country, again, one that was founded on religious liberty and promises of religious liberty, of just terrible persecution of just a diverse array of religious communities. And so, what does it look like to rededicate ourselves to a version of our memory that is more authentic, but also more hopeful for what we can become?
Thank you. And Diane, I know you were wanting to say something. If you could come off mute.
Well, I think this idea of rededication, I think some countries, how they view the earth, they were given citizenship to recognize that the earth, Mother Earth, will only sustain us for so long until she shakes and shouts and shakes us off and cleanses herself. And as human beings, we have a responsibility to the earth. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but truly it is about living in gratitude and living in thanks for all things, even the things that we look at and view as really harsh and hard. And a long time ago, there was one of the earlier Taradahos, Diane Schenandoah. We were doing a documentary concerning the Europeans that came here and settlers, and he was asked, if you could, would you wish away all the white people? Would you wish them all away? And he says, no, absolutely not. We have a message to teach them, and they have a message to teach us. It really is about that recognizing and understanding what we can gift to each other, and in our shared memory, of course, but in the future, and recognizing that we are no greater than each other. We could be as best educated as we could possibly be, yet still, take things for granted. The water turning out, turning the faucet on. And these are very simple teachings, but again, it's really true, when we are all energetic beings that we have a responsibility to share a good energy. We have a responsibility against a negative energy to bring that love and that peace to each other. There is no hierarchy. There's no hierarchy, no matter who's in Congress or who does what or who's, out there politically. Everybody is a being that where we need each other. We say we can't scratch the middle of our own back for a reason. So.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you for those words, Diane. And I want to reiterate some of what you're saying, and in that we're the coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. We don't do things, including this webinar, just for the purpose of educating or edifying ourselves, right? We're actually actively imagining and seeking to embody a world that does not yet exist, and really working to co-identify collectively what liberation is for us all. And so I just appreciate your words, Diane, and reminding us, hey, we're not in an environment where we can just relax and say, well, everything's terrible and there's nothing I can do about it, right? Like, it's up to us to actually imagine and envision what is next for us. And so with that, I want to say, Mark, do you want to give us the last word on this question?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think when I read it, I was excited to have a chance to talk about it. Frederick Douglass wrote a piece back in the 1800s, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. And if you've never read it, I encourage people to read it. It's a fantastic article that he wrote. Basically saying what they're celebrating here was never promised to us. So why would we celebrate it? It was never something meant for us. And I did something the other day, actually, before I did my podcast a couple of weeks ago. I read the Declaration of Independence again. I don't know if I was last read in elementary school or maybe I did it a few decades ago. I forget, but I haven't read it in a while. And I read it again. And it kind of made me laugh because, and I don't have time to go into, there's 27 grievances. I had a list of at least 10 grievances, I think, if not more, where we're basically doing the very thing we were accusing the crown of doing to us as a nation, right? Just to give you a few examples, there is grievance number 5, you're dissolving representation and you're enforcing laws without our ability to have a voice or a say. You're obstructing the laws for naturalization and migration, right? I mean, look what we're doing right now. Number 9 is you're making judges dependent upon the will of the king alone. And how often does Donald Trump call the conservative judges on the Supreme Court his judges, and we react like a childish parent when they don't rule in his favor? They accuse the king of erecting new offices to harass our people. I mean, these are things that we're doing today, but not just today, right? Whether it's the deportations or the tariffs or all these things. I mean, Donald Trump is aspiring to President Obama's deportation numbers. He would love to get Obama's deportation numbers, right? We are screaming about the tariffs right now. How about the tariffs on oil that Jimmy Carter enacted illegally, even against his own party when he put tariffs on oil back in the 1970s? I mean, this is not just who we are today, it's who we've always been. The difference with today is now we are treating our political opponents that way. So if you read the Declaration of Independence in light of the nation's history, their grievances weren't that these actions existed. It was that this Christian king of this Christian nation was enacting these things against Christian colonists in these lands. And there's one grievance where they accuse the king of being violent, and they say you're not living up to your role as a Christian king. And then a few grievances later, they accuse natives of the same violence and say we're merciless Indian savages, right? so their grievance is that not that these things existed, but that the white Christian king is enacting these things against white Christian colonists.
Mm.
And how many people get upset, right, when ICE goes in and harasses white people, right? That's like, no, 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 that's the line too far, right? I mean, this is where, and so this is what we're screaming about. It's not that, I mean, we've been doing these things. Democrats have done these things. Republicans have done these things. These are things we've done throughout our entire history to women, to natives, to people of color, to other marginalized people, to LGBTQ. We've done this since our founding.
Mm.
Now we're just complaining because now we have one party who is doing it to white people from another party.
Mm.
And now this is a crisis. Now it's like, oh, this is a step too far.
Yeah,
And
I
so-
appreciate what you're saying, Mark, and thank you for bringing it home and reminding us that this isn't about things have just recently gotten terrible because of one political party or another, right? I mean, I appreciate you underlining that, and I want to take I want to shift gears here. Sorry to interrupt you, because I want to make sure there's time for questions, and it's nearly that time. But I wanted to also just say one thing I don't want to get into here. Among the amazing people in this room, what a gift to be alive when you're alive. Diane and Mark and Asma, be able to have this conversation, and all the people who are here virtually. So grateful to be here in this space. And what I don't want to do is get into this idea that that we're all miserable and we're going to commiserate. That's not really what we're about here, but rather to spark the imagination for the next step. What is the world that doesn't yet exist that we are all poised to live into? Because we have the opportunity now to organize ourselves, to grow community for that, as we have the opportunity to do that. And just as Asma was indicating before, so many of us on this call collaborated in working for a religious freedom at Oak Flat. And so many of us have the opportunity to continue to expend our life energy for justice now and in the future. I'll close with just my comments with just one last thing that an elder in the Yakima lands, where I lived for several decades, shared with me. Why do we live but to demonstrate to our children how to live with courage? We have the opportunity to live with courage now. And so as we go into Q&A, I would love for us to continue to keep that on our mind. How do we organize for justice now on behalf of our ancestors and on behalf of our descendants? So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Do Hoyer, who is our director of campaigns, national campaigns. So grateful for you, Do. So grateful to be here in this space together. And Do is going to facilitate the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all the panelists for your insights, and thank you all for being on this webinar. So far, I've seen a couple questions come in, and this one is directed at you, Mark, but I think would also welcome others to respond. How do we form the common memory that we were talking about? And some further questions of, is it possible to form it? Do we do this through public schools? Do we plan for that seventh generation? Keep telling these stories that expose unsettling truths? What do you think?
That is a great question. I mean, I don't know what's going to be harder to edit the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, or to get Texas and Oklahoma to rewrite our history books. I think those are both battles that are going to be really, really hard to fight. And so one of the things that I work very hard to do is to keep my voice as independent as possible, so that no institution or corporation can control my message. Because the doctrine of discovery and this history is a threat to institutions and to corporations. Individuals are excited about these types of things, but the institutions, it's a threat to them. And so one of the things that I do myself, and I encourage a lot of people to do, is how can you be subversive about this? How can you get your message out? How can you teach this stuff, right? I didn't go into the schools and teach this necessarily. I taught my kids, and my kids wrote reports on it in their schools and made the teachers deal with it coming from their own reports and their own things. And, so I taught my kids at home the things that a more accurate perspective of what they were learning in school so they could go in and challenge their classmates and challenge their teachers. I put a lot of resources up online because the challenge with this history, and if you've read my book, Unsettling Truths, chapter 11 is about trauma. And I talk about a multi-generational communal manifestation of a perpetration-induced traumatic stress. I interact with white people as another group of traumatized people, not victims of trauma, but dealing with trauma that they've enacted or that they're standing on. And so when you bring up this history, you're going to trigger white people, and they're going to either run away or they're going to react poorly. And so what I tell people to do is if you bring this history to a white audience and you're not prepared for it, you're going to get a lot of feedback and a lot of controversy coming your way. So find good resources online and watch them together so you're not the enemy. You're not the one who's like, you're not the one bringing the bad news. You're there to help them process through those things. So for example, I gave a TEDx talk several years ago that 19 minutes long that goes through the doctrine of discovery and lays out a vision of what does it mean to have a legacy 7 generations behind and 7 generations ahead. And it challenges in a bipartisan way both our history and where we're going as a nation. And I encourage people to watch that with people who might not be open to hearing about it. Let them scream at me, and you can help them walk through the history with them, and you can be like a partner with them as they're wrestling through learning and understanding these things. But I think it's something we just have to be very consistent with. And I've chosen not to try and change the educational system, but how can I interject the voice and the message in the most honest way I can, kind of through a subversive method. So
Thank
that's
you,
one way
Mark.
to think about it.
I sure appreciate that. Thank you. And I want to respond to this quickly too and say, all of us are kind of in this context of seeing ourselves as individuals in the context of a nation that prioritizes individualism. And when we think about how institutions are arranged, they aren't individuals doing their individual part. They're working collectively. And to dismantle or to even challenge these institutions, we must work collectively. And that's what we have the opportunity to do here in the coalition. Join us. We want you. We need you. Join us.
If I could interject really quickly, the Witness to Injustice blanket exercise is probably one of the most powerful teaching tools, an interactive teaching tool, and I would encourage organizations to pull this team of people in. And right now they're out of Syracuse, but they actually purchased it from Mohawk elders who designed it to tell the history, and it was part of the Truth and Reconciliation across Canada, but they designed it in a way that it's participatory. All the participants participate, and they take on an identity of different nations across the United States, and they go through the history of it and how it was erased. And they call it a blanket exercise because a blanket slowly shrivels down, and you see the population just dissipate down into 2 or 3 people at the end, and it's incredibly emotionally moving. And that's where I've heard a lot of people say, why didn't I learn about this history? Well, because it's been hidden, it's been buried. So it's an incredible teaching tool. So I would encourage any organizations and basically do the work that you're doing, Sarah, in your organization, because you guys are amazing, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do. Thank you.
I want to endorse what Diane said. What the blanket exercise is amazing. It's a great way to get, especially adults, with kind of interactive learning, to understand that history and to visually see what the history did. So yeah, Diane, I couldn't agree more. The blanket exercise is a fantastic way to teach people, and as well as getting involved here.
I just want to second just like the overall approach here, just in terms of thinking creatively about educational exercises, but also I think, Mark, you used the word subversive approaches, which I liked. And I think you're exactly right that it's hard to get people uh, on the same page in terms of like this is a thing worth learning about, right? In terms of like just the uphill battle with changing the educational curriculum in Texas and Oklahoma and elsewhere. Certainly, we've seen those fights happen with other parts of the historical curriculum. Um, but I think one thing I think about in my work is often this idea of like interest convergence, which was proposed first by Derek Bell and is one of the building blocks of critical race theory. And it's often kind of like he ended up becoming like this huge pessimist, but I think there's like an optimist version of it, which is like when you can show people, including people in power, including white people, right, who are alarmed, Mark, by certain, harms to their own people, and like how do you kind of use that interest that they have as a way of kind of aligning your own interests and then bringing them along, right? Like show how they're invested, like it's important to them, it serves their interests, and how can we kind of think strategically about how to frame this in a way that makes people think that it's not about other people. They're not being altruistic. They're actually just being self-interested. And I think there's lots of interesting creative ways that we can think about that.
I am currently working on a third book. I'm writing a second. I'm working on a third called Decolonizing Health. And the goal of Decolonizing Health is I'm trying to demonstrate how, because this nation was founded by people who had a doctrine of discovery and saw natives as savages and not human, they never bothered to ask how to live here well. And because they never asked, they never were able to learn from our wisdom that we've learned from living here for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. And that has been detrimental to the physical, mental, spiritual health of this nation. And so I think, what you're saying as Asma is, so important, where if we can frame the native peoples, the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island as the hosts of the land, who are able to share wisdom with our colonizers, who are literally dying from poor health, right? From poor health and everything else. And yet we have wisdom from our ancestors of how to live here well, how to eat, how to move, do everything else here well, that could massively impact and benefit this nation overall. And I think something like that it's a really good way. I'm sure you've all read the book Braiding Sweetgrass, where she talks about indigenous wisdom and all of that in there. So yeah, I very much think that's a good approach.
Thank you, Mark. I wonder if we have time for one more question, Doe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a couple versions of this question in the chat that I think ties to the overarching question, but what does celebration look like? So even questioning whether there's anything to celebrate, perhaps, look like when the founding promise of freedom was never meant for all people on this land.
I think it's very important that we remember to be grateful. Remember to be grateful. The sun comes up, we're able to talk, we're able to speak, and that sounds very simple, but we forget to be grateful. We forget to live in gratitude for all things, not just a healthy meal or of course we're all thankful for this and that, but to really live in gratitude means to take care of yourself as well. And that's one of our elder teachings, is that this is how you pass on that healthy living and that healthy way of being onto your children. You teach them to be thankful, because children don't live in gratitude today. They're given everything.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the sort of building on the gratitude point, which I think is key, is, for all the faults in this country and historically and present, I've worked on international human rights cases, and I can tell you there's lots of places in the world that where there are things that we take for granted here that are just, unheard of over there. And so despite all the complexities and all the things that we have to grapple with, I think there is a lot in our constitutional culture in the United States to be grateful for.
I am taking much more solemn approach to this 250th anniversary. I long ago gave up celebrating the 4th of July, and I'm not sure what or how to celebrate this when we've become the very thing that this nation was complaining about in the first place. But I try very hard. I think it's important that we point people to the benefit of understanding the story. What's behind this? Why is it not helpful? Why has it been so hurtful? Why has it caused so much damage? And then to lay out the vision for the common memory. And I try to tell people all the time, there's no point in our history where we've had healthy community. This is why I talk about the need for truth and conciliation versus reconciliation, because reconciliation implies there was a previous harmony, and that's a myth that it never existed. And so I try to keep people's mind on, no, we're doing something, we're building something for the very first time. When I ran for president, my goal was to build a nation where for the very first time, we the people might actually mean all the people. It's never meant all the people. That's not why the Constitution was written. That's not why the Declaration, Joe Biden loved to misquote the Declaration. He loved to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created equal. I don't disagree with the sentiment, but that's not what it says. And so I try to say, yeah, we have this horrible history and this crappy foundation, but we can build a common memory. We can wrestle with the things that are hard, and we can actually build a healthy community for the very first time. We can do something that's never been done in this nation before. And that's the vision I work hard to hold out in front of people.
I appreciate that, Mark. It's why we love you. And I want to say to everyone here too, what a joy it is to be alive now at this time of the turning. What a great privilege to be alive now. And what we have to celebrate is the world that has yet to be, because we have yet to dream it and imagine it and then embody it and live into it. To that end, we've held this conversation, amazing conversation, also to activate you all, because this isn't about just enriching ourselves and learning or hearing inspirational words from people we admire. It's also about taking action. So this, I'd love to introduce Deborah Yoder, who is going to speak some action to you all.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with you all. I'm so grateful to have heard the wisdom of Asma, Mark, and Diane. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing from each of your perspectives. Yeah, as we're reflecting on this, there are a lot of questions in the chat around what can we do to celebrate this, or how can we respond? I see a note about grieving. All of these, how can we respond, is what we're hoping to talk about now. The coalition would like to invite everyone on the call to join us in these actions. So one, we'd love it if you would host a prayer vigil in your community on the 4th of July weekend or in the week leading up to it. Or if you would also join us in writing letters to the editor about America 250, highlighting the way that the doctrine of discovery continues to show up in our present day legal structures. With these actions, we want to expand and complexify the narrative as people are talking about the founding of this country, as our speakers have broken down, this idea of religious freedom. It's not actually a reality for everyone who lives here. We want to expose that. We want to highlight that. Not everyone doesn't know about the Doctrine of Discovery or what it is, how it was so instrumental in the founding of this country. And so with these resources, we want to equip you to be able to have those conversations and take that conversation to a public sphere, holding these public prayer vigils with liturgy written by our chaplain, Debbie Royals, and songs and prayers for various campaigns that the coalition has been involved in. And letter to the editor toolkit, which has, again, resources for writing and submitting letters and talking points for specific campaigns around land justice and Indigenous sovereignty. As we say in the coalition a lot, the antidote to despair is knowing that we are not alone, and we are not alone on this call. There are almost 200 of us, 177 on this call. And so if each of us can take this action into our community, can hold a vigil, exposing this history and envisioning a future where this is a reality, where we are free and interdependent, recognizing that and respecting each other. That is the vision we want to celebrate this 4th of July weekend. That is the future we want to work towards. So I invite you to join us in doing that.
Take action today, please do. And if you say, gosh, I'd like to be more involved than just writing a letter or having a prayer vigil, please come to our orientation. We have orientation every month for new volunteers. We are anxious for you to be involved with us. You can also get connected with one of our campaigns that could be in your region. Our annual gathering is coming up in Pennsylvania this year. We'd love to see you there. It's possible for us to change reality itself by working and living, praying collectively. In fact, I would say the world has never changed any other way. This is our moment. Let's do it. Let's do it together. So grateful to these leaders, these national leaders who've chosen to join us and share your points of view. Thank you, Mark and Diane and Asma. And I think we are now going to close with prayer. Am I right on that, Deborah?
Yes, we are closing in prayer.
Before we do that, I see a quick note in the chat asking where our annual meeting is. And I wonder if Deborah or Doe would be able to respond to that. We're actually in two places this year in Pennsylvania. This is the weekend of July 31st through August 3rd, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And we're starting out in Harrisburg. Am I right about that?
Yes,
and
we're going
ending up in Lancaster.
Harrisburg and Lancaster.
Yeah. But we'd be willing to keep your eye on our newsletter. You can see the registration link. We're anxious for you to join us. Please do.
Now? Okay. We the people, we ask and pray to Singwai that the United States repudiate the doctrine of discovery. We the people ask and pray Singwai that the original inhabitants of this land be recognized rather than discovered. We the people ask and pray to Singwai that the land be returned to the care of the original inhabitants of this land. Renew our hearts in hope.
We the people pray to hear the truth where it has been obscured and purposely misconstructed. We the people pray to follow the wisdom of our native elders who teach us what real stewardship means. We the people pray for an understanding of interdependence with a gift economy where resources are shared so that all may have life and live in it abundantly.
Renew our hearts in hope.
We, the people, pray for a time of deep conversion and renewed faith and real transformation of the hearts of all. We, the people, pray for those who are burdened by suffering, illness, or loss, named silently or aloud. We, the people, pray for those who have laid down their lives in search of truth, humility, respect, love, bravery, courage, honesty, wisdom, and intelligence.
Renew our hearts in hope.
Thank you, everyone across North America, across the United States and Canada, for choosing to be with us here this evening. We are so grateful for you and your life energy. We're so grateful for you and your prayers, regardless of your tradition. So grateful for your willingness to step into community together to create a collective that is willing to seek self-determination and justice with Indigenous peoples and liberty for us all. Thank you for choosing to be here.
Creator God, we pray you hear our petitions, kindle the flame of justice in our hearts, reawaken us to the hope of the world as you created it. Transform us into tireless cultivators spreading seeds of love. Vanquish all evil. Forgive the evil we have done and the evil done on our behalf. Surround and protect us. Go before us, behind us, above us, and below, beside and live within each of us today and every day of our lives. May it be so.